Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the warm welcome. The food's been amazing. First of all, Elizabeth, thanks to you, your team, Matt, all the hard work. Looking at the slides that were shown up there, we see a lot going on in the city. We see the vibrancy. We see everything that's brought about from the small business returning to downtown Mobile, the everyday, the walkability. We see the festivals. We see the instruments, the events, all of which go in the theme of today, who will be introducing the key speaker in just a minute. Mathew Petty, he is our key speaker, nationally recognized. He specializes in contemporary municipal best practices. He's got a passion for cities and that manage higher revenues and happier communities. His accomplishments are many. I'm going to list just a few today. So he's the creator of a novel technique that cities use to develop called pattern zones. The innovative program lowers development barriers, makes sprawl repair, appropriate infill, and Main Street commerce accessible to residents and builders. He's facilitated or consulted for municipalities and civic organizations in more than a dozen communities across the country. His planning and design proposals have won grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Knight Foundation, Walton Family Foundation, and many others. And Congress for the New Urbanism has also awarded his work with national honors. Mathew was elected 4 times and served almost 13 years as a council member in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where he sponsored new database processes with a placemaking framework in transportation, tourism budgets. Nationally known, award-winning, fortunate to have him here today in our great city of Mobile. Let's everybody give him a warm welcome. Welcome, Mathew Petty.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I was sitting next to Commissioner Ludgood, and she got out her notebook. I'm going to do my best to do a great job, make sure those notes are great. I've been thinking a lot about how to actually start this for a couple of weeks. And usually I kind of know, but I struggled with this a little bit. And I do a few of these things, and when you're a consultant doing this kind of stuff, there's this kind of idea. It's not a great idea, but there's this kind of idea that you're supposed to show up, have a look around, and then tell people in a room like this how to fix their city. It didn't take me very long. We started right off with the tour to see that that wouldn't be the right thing to do, that wouldn't work. And I thought if I were to stand up here and try to do that, well, shoot, I think that might make me the joke. So instead, what I want to do is talk about next steps. What you've seen today on the screen, what's been described by the speakers, even what you heard in the invocation, is real. And what you have here, I think you have to see that you've already done the hardest parts. You've already, if Mobile needed fixing, you've already done that. And what's most important, what I hope you'll get out of this, what I hope I can help you with, is to see how important it is to keep that going and what those next steps might be. So we're going to talk about a couple of those. Can we get the screens up? Thank you. So what I'm going to talk to you about is what comes alongside and has to go along with downtown development. What we might think of that as incremental development. Now, it's really important that a city like Mobile has landmark projects and pursues the big, sexy ideas that are really going to put you on the map, that are going to be on the postcards that you can brag about. That's important. But what must go along with it is a thoughtful approach and a diligent, never-ending work plan to work on your downtown and your midtown neighborhoods along with that. What you see on the screen is just an example of what a lot of different blocks look like in a city like Mobile. You can see that things are a little bit spread out, but they're still there. Over time, when you're committed to this, you can actually add into these neighborhoods. You can do this kind of infill in a way that preserves what's there, that preserves what people already love. In this example, these buildings, these are inspired by what's already there, what people do like. And from the beginning to the end diagram, there are 6 times as many homes for people to live in. And the neighborhood feels kind of the same. It still feels familiar to the people that grew up there, to the people that still work there. This is a little bit different than conventional development. There's no need to erase what you already have that is so good in order to keep making it better. This kind of development is the kind of development you've already started, and if you can establish a system that makes it even easier, then you're going to see more and more neighborhoods able to support the local businesses that won the kinds of awards you just saw. You're going to see more and more people able to participate in what Mobile is doing, and you'll be able to support these transformative projects, whether they're transit, whether they're parks, whether it's just as simple as trying to keep the streets beautiful and the potholes filled. This is how you do it. Every single one of those buildings is worth thousands of dollars in new tax revenue every year after that, forever, for your local government and for your school districts. That's business planning. That's revenue planning for your community. Lots of times in cities we make decisions about, does this feel like the right thing to do? That's only the first part of making a great decision. The next part, if you're in business, you know this, the next part is to run the numbers. And these are the numbers you got to run. This is where revenue comes from in a city, is making sure that property is occupied, that property is put to productive use, and that property is there to provide space for people to live, for people to work. You're already doing this. Here's another example. Took this picture yesterday. There are 7 townhomes that are being constructed here. Beautiful example. Now, I love these buildings, but this isn't a presentation about architectural style. This isn't a presentation about urban design. This is a presentation about how to make stuff like this the easiest kind of development to see in your city. And to do that, you have to do a couple of things. Number one, you have to recognize that you need more of this, whether it's 2 stories or 3 stories or 1 story, whether it's French Revival or Greek or Craftsman, whether they're bungalows, whether they're townhomes. That is not the important question. It's something that you can answer street by street, parcel by parcel, commission by commission, or builder by builder. But this is the kind of work that has to continue, and not just continue, but expand radically. We've all heard conversations where people say, you know what, downtown and midtown is landlocked. There's just not enough room to do more houses. That's not true. There's room for more than 1,000, perhaps thousands more properties and homes that could be built on like this. Truly, think of the potential. Think of what that means for the momentum that you already have in downtown. Think about what that means for the people who are there who might work on creating these properties. This is jobs for tradespeople, right? This is jobs for locals to make this happen. This was a bit of a reality check for me. I was on the city council for 13 years. Along the way, I decided to become a city planner and work in the private sector to help communities address their housing issues. For me, maybe for a lot of people in this room, making your community a better place is a calling, a personal calling, maybe even a spiritual calling. And for me, I consider housing to be one of the most important issues of our time. People need it. They don't just need it because they need a place to live. They need it so that they can be good friends, so that they can be good parents, so that they can do well in school, so that they can perform in their jobs. They need good places to live, to have good lives. I think that's profound. I think we have to center ourselves in that if we want to undertake this work, because there's a feature of this work that is hard to accept for me anyway, and that's that it never ends. All the success you've already had could be undone if you quit. If you quit, everything you've accomplished could go away again. It never, ever, ever ends. And so whenever I started this work, I started with this assumption. I thought that our laws were bad, and I could just change the laws, and it would fix everything. I knew that builders and developers made decisions about what they wanted to build. Of course, they want it to be marketable. They need to be able to sell it or lease it. But also, it has to be legal, of course. I thought that was enough because I knew our laws were bad already. And that's an important thing. You have to do that, but it isn't enough. In fact, what developers and builders usually do to make their decisions is they ask, what is the easiest thing I can get done? And if the easiest kind of project that a builder or developer in Mobile can execute is another subdivision out on the edge, maybe even out in the county, that's what they're going to continue to do. And they're not going to take on infill projects. You're going to continue to be limited in what happens in downtown and midtown because the only people who will be able to do infill projects, let me correct myself, the only people that will be willing to do infill projects are people with that spirit that just won't quit, where that's their passion. They have to prove it, and they're never going to stop. And there aren't that many of those people. They're special. They deserve all the awards that they get, and there also are not enough of those people. And if you want to close that gap, if you want to see hundreds or thousands of new places for people to live in these areas, you have to change the systems so that it becomes easy to do those kinds of projects like you saw on the prior slide. It has to be easy. And today it isn't easy. Doing any of those projects requires special permissions, special hearings. You have to know the right people. You have to know the right lawyer or the right architect or the right engineer. You have to know the right planner at City Hall. And you have to make sure that you don't take the wrong step. Because if you do take the wrong step, that could even screw it up, even if you've got great intentions and great relationships. The system's not easy. And you can't blame the city for this. They've only got so many hours in a week. If one person who is going to do 200 units asks them for a meeting, and another person who's only going to do a duplex asks them for a meeting, and they both have to have the meeting to get their project done, it's totally rational to say, I can only take the meeting with the person doing the big project. That's all I have time for. I've got to make an impact. You have to change the systems to make those kinds of projects possible at scale, to make them routine. And that's really what we're talking about. So I want to jump into some nuts and bolts. Then we're going to talk about a case study. We're going to talk about an opportunity that's coming up. To start, I want to drill this point home that small-scale development is just different than conventional development. If you're doing a conventional project, you're at a bigger outfit, you know what you're doing, you've been at this for a while, maybe you run into an issue, maybe you can hire somebody to handle that. Maybe you can hire out the expertise. You run into another issue, maybe you can put another couple of stories on top of your building so that you have more cash flow on that and you can absorb that issue into the project. Maybe you can buy a little bit more property to handle the parking issue that's coming up, or to expand the space to address this, that, or the other that you've heard. Small-scale developers don't have those luxuries. They have to ask this question all of the time, what can I get done with what I already have? Because they don't have the means to make their projects bigger to solve problems. I did a project in Fayetteville. It's a small project, 10,000 square feet, 2 storefronts, 9 apartments, all in one building. The legal fees on that project were $16,000. When I talked to the banks, I said, if I had done 200 units, how much would the legal fees be? They said $16,000. Right? It almost killed my project. If I'd only been doing 4 apartments, or if I'd only been doing a duplex, it would have killed my project. These projects are very different. They don't have the ability to go to meeting after meeting after meeting, or be referred from department to department. They don't have the ability to chase down every bank in town to make sure they can finally get the terms that are going to work. It has to be easy, or they won't even start. There are probably people in this room right now who think, you know what, Matthew, you seem pretty excited about this, but if putting cottages in people's backyards was going to be a thing, we'd already be seeing it. People would be figuring it out. That's not right. That is like saying we're going to decide whether or not to build the I-10 bridge by going out to the waterfront and seeing how many people are already swimming across the bay. It's not an easy thing to undertake these projects, and people are smart. When they do their research and they see that it's not easy, they quit before they get started. They don't even make the phone calls. If you want to prove to yourself that these kinds of projects are legit, that they could really happen, you look at the fundamentals. You look at the vacancy rates downtown. How long does it take for new places to lease up? It's fast. That means you need more of it. That means it's in demand. That means they will lease up. They will sell if you can figure out a way to get more of these things built. Confusing systems kill these kinds of projects. So you got an opportunity to come up to get started. It's not just about fixing the systems. I told you you needed more people. There's a workshop coming up the Downtown Alliance has sponsored with a nonprofit called the Incremental Development Alliance. I won't be here for that, but I'm on the board with that organization. If you are in this room and you've seen a piece of property and you've thought, you know what, somebody ought to do something with that, maybe it's me. You should come to this. If you know somebody who sees a piece of property in town and says somebody ought to do something with that, maybe it's me. They need to come to this. You need to refer them to this. You need to tell them about this, because no matter where they're starting, even if only they have is excitement, well, excitement's not enough. You got to get skills. You got to have knowledge to do these kinds of projects, and that's where we start. That's our mission at this nonprofit, is to teach locals how to do the kind of projects that the community says they want to see in their own neighborhoods. So we go through everything. What are you good at? What are you not good at? What are you going to learn to be good at? How do we build a team around that? That's where we start. We take them through everything, through how to analyze the risks of a project, for how to design, for how to actually see things constructed, how to do the market research, and so on and so forth. And then we put them through this exercise where we make them do site plans, and we make them do the financial analysis, we make them do a zoning analysis, and they see how wrong it is and how their ideas aren't going to work, and they have to change it and they have to fix it. We have this joke. Anybody in the room does yoga, you probably already know this. The small-scale developer pose. No? No one? It's like, totally necessary exercise. You have to get through it to do this kind of work. You do have to have the spark. You have to be somebody who won't quit when there's a small failure, and somebody who will celebrate the small wins so that you can keep going. But you also have to have the skills and the knowledge, and that's what we do with this. Now, it's not a guarantee. There's a lot of ways to go bankrupt doing small-scale development. More ways to go bankrupt than there are to win. It's hard work. And there's no get-rich-quick guaranteed way of doing it. But there is an approach. And people who go to these kinds of workshops, they will come away with it and they will say, I know what questions to ask now. I know how to get started. I know how to get answers. And if you've got 100 more people like that in 2 years, you're going to see a lot more projects out there, because your cohort of people who are ready and willing to pioneer new projects in these neighborhoods is going to be so much bigger, and it's going to be made up of people who live here. You can't stop there. You do have to have systems. That's what we're going to talk about next, and what we're going to round out the talk with today. This is a case study from Claremore, Oklahoma. If you already know Claremore, you know Claremore is almost nothing like Mobile. There's only 17,000 people that live in Claremore. We use this as a case study because they implemented a pre-approved building program, and they have a staff of 2 people in their planning department that help with permit reviews. 2 people. And they are now issuing infill permits for projects just like what we're talking about in less than 5 days. They did that by looking at their neighborhoods, discerning what was right for those neighborhoods with those people, and then pre-approving buildings, pre-approving architectural plan sets, having the building permits ready to go on file, so that people, when people walk in the door, they say, hey, I've got an idea for this property, what can I do? They say, you could do anything you want, just like before, or you could choose from this menu if you want to get started right away. And that's what people do. They get started right away because it's easy, right? And now there are more people doing that kind of work. Even conventional builders, even conventional outfits that are doing subdivisions, who have only ever flirted in their boardrooms with the ideas of doing small-scale infill projects and have never been willing to retool all of their systems for completely rational reasons, are now in Claremore deciding we're going to make this a part of our portfolio because you figured those systems out for us. Mobile might not be able to get to 5 days with a system like this. It's incredible. You have more regulations, you have historic commissions, you have more neighborhoods, you have more things to be concerned about, rightfully so. But you could make a big difference. You could create an easy button for people that want to do these kinds of projects, for people that are dreamers. The way it works is pretty simple. It's not a complicated concept. If you're like me, when we thought of this, we thought, why didn't we think of this before? We already have to issue building permits. We already say in our master plans, we already have these beautiful watercolor renderings of what we want. Why don't we pre-approve those? Why don't we make doing that kind of work the easiest work out there? So it's simple. It doesn't replace what you're already doing. It exists alongside what you're already doing. If someone wants to do a custom project, they have their own taste, their own ambition, they can still do that. They don't have to use a pre-approved building plan. So it's completely voluntary. That gives, as a city, as a community, you a lot of flexibility. There's probably 4 to 6 months of time saved to get to market for somebody who's using this kind of a program, to opening the doors, to getting construction started, than using a conventional permitting system. That puts a lot of value in it. And it means, because it's voluntary, that your city, your community is free to require new best practices that you know are good ideas, but that you can't require for every single project, that aren't appropriate for every single project. I'll give you an example. There at the bottom, we call that building a flex house. We call it a flex house because by virtue of the program, the city strikes a deal with people who want to build that house. And the deal just says this: this house is designed to be built as either a duplex or a single-family house, and you're required when you build it to frame it, wire it, and plumb it for that conversion sometime in the future. It doesn't mean you install the second kitchen, but the pipes are there in the walls for the second kitchen. So this is a house, a flex house, that is meant to address changing demographics, changing economies, changing households, right? I would love to live in this house with my wife and my 2 daughters, and then whenever they maybe eventually move out, we'll see, times are changing. But if they were to move out, we could totally renovate this, and then we could use the income to take our vacation or to retire a little earlier. And that's a key difference between small-scale developers and people who are doing larger-scale projects. It's not bottom-line driven every single time. Sometimes it's driven by pride. What can I do at the end of my street or on my block that is going to make a difference, that I can be proud of, that I can be fulfilled by years down the line? What can I do that is going to just make it that much easier for me to put food on the table, and I don't care about the rate of return, right? Totally different ways of thinking, and you have to have different systems to honor this. Not all buildings have to be the same either. That's the first question people always ask when we talk about pre-approved building programs. They say, well, we don't want everything to look the same. Well, we don't either. Nobody does. Although I would challenge that just a little bit. A little bit of sameness is okay, maybe even lovely. Nobody makes a trip overseas to Paris and comes back and says, gosh, that was awful. All the buildings look the same. Never going back. Have you noticed that almost every main street in America kind of looks the same? But it's lovely, it's charming, we enjoy it, we love the variety, even though the theme is the same. Up top you see an example of this. That's a courtyard arrangement of 3 different buildings. At the back you have a cottage, this 1 story, it's about 800 square feet. That was designed and modeled in that community after a 19th century cottage, a historic home that people loved, that they thought was quaint and charming. And up front you see, quote unquote, the same building, but now the floor plans are stacked and it's a duplex with a fancy porch. We have other variations of that. You could put it on top of a garage. Now it's a garage apartment, but it's inspired by the same cottage. There's a theme here. And you can do this with any kind of building, any kind of architectural style. And if you do that, if you get the variety right, then you can address 80% of what people would want to do for themselves. When we first did these programs, we made a mistake, but we didn't know it until way later. There are about a dozen of these programs across the country. They're very new, but cities are getting very excited about it. The mistake we made was we asked people in rooms like this, we would say, would you love to see these buildings in your neighborhood? And they would say, yes, you nailed it. You listened to us. Thanks for coming back and show us what you changed based on what we told you. We're ready for this. and we'd go out for drinks and celebrate. But come to find out, those buildings weren't exactly right for them. Them wanting them in their neighborhoods was different than the question we should have asked, which was, would you build this for yourself? And that requires more variety than what we were able to give in our early programs. And so now what we recommend is that you have to have enough buildings, 8 to 10 different choices for every kind of building, so that people can see what they want, so that they can choose something that will work for them. Whether they're a builder, whether they're a hobbyist who's only ever going to do one project for reasons of pride or ambition or otherwise. And so there are a lot of different kinds of pre-approved building programs out there. You could DIY this yourself. There are 2 or 3 different models that different cities have used, but this is one of the most important lessons, is that to address the risk that things are all the same, you have to have enough variety, and you have to have even more than that, because you have to account for individual tastes. But if you do that, you can do things that are special. Maybe you can even issue infill permits in less than 5 days. We like to put all this online when we do it, and it's not that it's online that makes it special, although we do kind of complain. It's kind of a sad state of affairs that so many government programs still live in laminated sheets in a 3-ring binder somewhere, and you have to actually go there and find the right person to learn about it, or that they're on one obscure web page on the city website, or they live in a network drive. They should be accessible online, but more than that, these programs are different than your typical planning projects. Typical planning project, you put a lot of work, you do a lot of listening sessions, you can do that in good faith and be totally earnest, and at the end of the day, you end up with some legal language drafted by a lawyer that says, here's what we're going to do, here's what we're going to allow. And no matter how good a job you do with that, you still end up at the final public hearing with somebody who is very earnest, who might even be right when they oppose it, and they say, you did a really good job and you've got the right ideas, but someone is going to take advantage of this and we're going to end up with a mistake. And it's going to be there forever. You don't have those kinds of issues with a pre-approved building program, because what you see is what you get. If you think allowing people to build cottages in their backyard is a good idea in theory, but you're worried about people taking advantage of that, maybe one of the things you should do is pre-approve the cottages that you do want, and start with that, and prove that that's okay, by virtue of making it a what you see is what you get program. So if you're a concerned resident with one of these programs, you can load up a map. You can see exactly what the program allows on any parcel you want, even the one right next door. You don't have to wonder if the legislation was drafted right, because it's what you see is what you get. If you're a builder, you can do the same thing. You can compare and contrast projects, and then when you're ready to submit an application, it's almost already totally complete. Now, not quite. The foundation might be different from one place to another. There might be a couple of other pieces of paperwork that have to be filed, but you have an application that is complete enough that when the city gets it on day one, they can say, yep, we're going to let you do that. You got a couple more things to paper the file folder with, but that's just technical. We can tell you right now that we're going to let you do it. And that's how a community like Claremore, with only 2 people on staff, can issue an infill permit in less than 5 days, because the application comes in ready to go. I bet if you're working for the city, this is an old story, but if you don't work for the city, you might be surprised that this is true. So many times, people who have that spark, that excitement, they come in and they say, I want to do something. I have a piece of property in mind. I have an idea. What can I do with this? And the city is not able to tell them how to start, how to make those decisions. Those are personal decisions. The application has to start a little bit more complete than that before discussions can really begin. So you've already done some of these things. These are all necessary to really build a system that has that easy button for the kinds of projects that you want to see. You've calibrated the codes pretty well. There's probably still a few things you need to do. There always is. This work never, ever ends. Codes always need to be updated, but you're pretty darn close. We know that there are systems for subsidizing these, for putting in infrastructure that's aggressive. That's a great set of work in Mobile. You've loaded 2 of the bases. You may have even hit some home runs. But if you really want to fill the stands, if you really want to get higher permit volumes, if you really want to see more housing built in these locations and make sure that housing is the right kind of housing, you're going to have to inspire people. And one of the best ways to do that is to load up all of the bases, maybe hit a grand slam. That's what packs the stadium out. That's what gets people excited for years to come. That starts with training and mentorship, absolutely essential. It's probably the foundation that often gets skipped. And it's not enough to just identify a couple of willing people in the community who act like elders, who act like mentors, who are willing to do that work. You have to cultivate this deliberately. You have to have these training and mentorship programs that are ongoing. You have to have a system for that. And if you were to do all these things and add pre-approved buildings into it, you might be really surprised what you're able to get done in a short amount of time. There is a saying that says it's very easy to overestimate what you might get done in 1 year, and just as easy to underestimate what you could get done in 5 years. And if you could build a system like that, you'll put yourself in that position where you surprise yourself. I want to end on this. I'm privileged to do this every once in a while, and I've been, whether it's as a tourist or as a consultant, to a couple of cities and towns that I've heard mentioned today. I've been to Charleston, I've been to Savannah, I've been to New Orleans, I've been to these cities that it seems like y'all have compared yourself to in the past. And I'm an outsider, and I want to say as an outsider that you've got something they don't have. You have momentum. You're not taking it for granted. And I think if you stay committed to not slowing down and trying to do all this at once, you'll hit that grand slam. And you've got the people here to do it. There's a joke in my field, as a city council member, I heard this a lot, that an expert was somebody who came from 200 miles away. Maybe that's me today, but you got experts here. The Downtown Alliance knows what they're doing. I talk to a lot of people while I'm here on official agendas and anytime I could unofficially. I had a conversation with our golf cart driver. Lived here for 47 years. He used to work for Firestone. Now he drives one of the golf carts downtown. And I said, "Is this real? How much has it changed? Is it changing for the better?" He knew it was. He had confidence that it was, and that it was going to keep going. And he knew that it's because of the coalition that you have in this room today, led by the Alliance. So listen to experts when you need to. Seek advice from people that are outsiders when you need to. But if I could leave you with one thing, trust the people you've got here, because what you've already accomplished is completely unique. Thank you. God bless you. Godspeed.